Now, in honor cultures, being called a coward is one of the worst things that can possibly happen to you. I mean, it's an insult. It's like, they prefer you to say something nasty about their mother before calling them a coward, see? But in the society we live in, bizarrely, being a coward is almost encouraged. Oh, my feelings and shit. Society today is fucked up beyond all recognition, okay? But anyway, that's for another video, a whole bunch of videos, a whole video series, okay? Insofar as cowards are concerned, never be a coward, never associate with cowards. That's the rule. It's a simple rule, and follow it. And I'm going to explain why. Now, you see, before we get into this issue, we have to define what's a coward. It's all good and fine to say, oh, you're a coward, he's a coward, they're a coward, whatever. But a coward has to be defined in order to understand why it is such a bad thing. A coward, quite simply, is a man who allows his fear to dictate his actions, especially at moments that are important, that are defining. Let me explain. Suppose the following situation. You're walking along and you see a wild dog. And I'm talking like some mean wild dog and something big. I don't know, a Rottweiler or whatever. You see this wild dog. Now, suppose you don't have any experience with dogs, right? So you're going to see the dog and you're going to be afraid of it, right? You're going to be afraid of it. And there are several options for you insofar as that situation is concerned. You can allow your fear to dominate you. And what will that result in? Well, you allow your fear to dominate you, dominate your actions, and you're going to resort to the fight or flight mode. You're either going to fight the dog, confront the dog, or run away from the dog. Now, both of those outcomes are bad. Because, see, a Rottweiler is a big dog, and a wild Rottweiler, maybe it's hungry, maybe it looks at you as a possible meal, and so if you decide to fight that dog, the dog's going to fight back, and it's not going to be pleasant, right? All right. Now, suppose you run away from the dog. You run from the dog, and what do you think is going to happen? The dog's going to chase you, because that's what dogs do. They see something, a potential prey running, and they run after it, of course, because dogs are predators, right? So, if you allow your fear to dictate your actions in that situation, you're going to flee or you're going to fight, both of which will lead to bad outcomes, right? But suppose, instead of that, you use your reason and you have a bit of knowledge that if you don't look at a dog and just continue on your way, the dog will ignore you and won't react towards you and won't try to attack you or anything like that, which is true, by the way. You see, if you see a dog, a wild dog, and you stare at it, the dog is going to think that a confrontation is on its way, it's going to attack you. Now, if you turn around and run from the dog's going to look at you as prey and chase after you. But if you simply continue on your way and sort of like ignore the dog, even as you keep on walking and keep it in the corner of your eye, but not staring at it, because if you stare at it, it's like a confrontation for them, right? But you just keep on going, keep it in the corner of your eye, and you go around the dog and be on your way. The dog isn't going to do anything to you. He's going to ignore you. That's a fact, by the way. Now see, that's the difference between, I don't want to say a brave man and a coward, but a coward will just either run or attack, see? And that happens all the time. We notice the guys who run away. We see the guy who runs from the dog, who runs from the gunfire, who runs away from the thing that he fears. And we say, oh, he's a coward. But it's not quite that simple, because sometimes the guy who constantly fights is also a coward. He's afraid. He's afraid of his environment. And so he expresses that fear and allows that fear to dominate him by attacking. The fact of the matter is, I spoke the other day about my old man, and I was thinking about him, and I realized something that I'd never really considered before, that my old man was a coward. I mean, he was a coward in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways that he failed to take chances and failed to do things because of fear. But I also realized that a lot of times he would attack people and just be a real mean bastard because he was afraid of them. His fear led him to attack. His insecurity led him to attack attack people and just be an unpleasant asshole, okay? So a coward is not only the guy who runs, he's sometimes the guy who is attacking and consistently attacking because he's masking fear, he's masking insecurity, he's masking whatever, but basically fear. That's the emotion that he is ceding to. He is allowing his actions to be dictated by fear. And so the coward runs from conflict. The coward runs from an unpleasant situation. He runs at the sound of gunfire. He runs at the sight of a dog. That's a coward. Simple. He allows his fear to dominate his emotions. I did a video. I explained right here that the difference between a man and women and children and every other creature on the face of this earth is that men can control their emotions and use reason, logic, and their knowledge to better their situation. They don't allow their emotion, whatsoever that emotion may be, to dictate what they do. They use their reason and logic to dictate their actions. You see? And fear, well, the coward allows his fear to dictate his actions. Thus, a coward is not really a man and should not be respected. Now, the thing of it is, we all have an inner coward because, of course, we are all subject to fear. And we all have that man within us who wants to cede to his fear. Because, you see, here's a key issue. There are a lot of foolish men, simpletons, dumb individuals who think that you shouldn't feel fear, that if you feel fear, you're deficient somehow. That's garbage. That's stupid. That's bullshit. See, we are human beings, so of course we feel fear. That's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. You see a dog and you're afraid of the dog. Yeah. Don't apologize for feeling fear. Never. It's a perfectly natural emotion. What you should apologize for is if you run from the dog, run from the thing that you fear, not because you realize you can't defeat it, but because you're scared of it and your fear drives you to action, okay? Never apologize for feeling fear because, see, it's not the issue of feeling or not feeling fear. You feel fear, that's perfectly normal. It's how you react to the fear. It's very meta if you think of it because you see a stimulus that happens outside of you, right? And that stimulus inspires fear, but it's how you react to the fear that defines whether you're a coward or not. You see? You're reacting to the reaction to the stimulus, if that makes any sense. Or think of it in these terms. Okay, you're riding a horse. Yeah, this is a great example. You're riding a horse, okay? You're riding a horse and the horse gets spooked, i.e. you feel fear, right? Now, what do? See, if you're riding a horse, and the horse, of course, gets scared, gets spooked, the horse wants to bolt, right? You want to bolt. But what do? You grab onto the reins of the horse and you pull back and you squeeze your legs, and you make sure that that horse doesn't bolt. Same thing. You're going to feel fear, and that's perfectly natural. The issue is how you handle the fear. And what you have to do is you have to rein it in, control it, like you would a horse. Not allow it to make you bolt. Not allow it to just, run screaming in terror. No matter how bad the thing that's happening, no matter how bad the stimulus, never run in fear. Because, see, fear is sort of like, to extend the metaphor, see, fear is like a bolting horse that, see, you can stop that bolting horse at that moment when it starts to bolt. You can stop it. But if the horse bolts and starts running and galloping like crazy, it's going to be much, much harder to stop it. Same with your fear, same with your reaction to fear. If you give in to fear immediately and let it go and start to do things based on your fear, it's going to be much harder later on to rein in your fear and control it, okay? So you have to learn as early as you can, as soon as you can, to control your fear. As soon as you get that blow of fear, you have to learn to pull back on the reins and don't let it get away from you. Because that's the thing about fear, it can get away from you. And it can get away from you and you start making bad decision after bad decision. And even as you cool down, you start realizing that the decisions you made out of fear have created a big old mess, and fixing those decisions becomes incredibly difficult. You see what I'm saying? But to go back to the earlier point, never deny your fear. The fact of the matter is, from my point of view, in my experience, denying your fear often as not leads you to react and act based on that fear. To acknowledge your fear automatically sort of like lowers the volume on that fear. Acknowledging it to yourself and saying, I'm scared. How do I handle this fear so that I make the right decision? Just that act alone will just lower the volume on that fear. So always accept your fear, but never surrender to it. Okay? Now, a lot of times people think of cowardice insofar as like physical things, like a war or some sort of thing like that, or like mountain climbing or some shit like that. You know, the soldier who takes the hill, and you think of cowardice only in those terms, in that context, in the context of physical activity. But you'll find cowardice in all sorts of places if you start to look for it. And in point of fact, you'll find people acting in cowardly ways on a daily basis, in the most quotidian of circumstances. Let me give you a specific example. See, I knew these two men. These two men, they were corporate guys. They both had corporate jobs, corporate professions. They were very successful, both of them. Now, both of them thought for a while that they wanted to be entrepreneurs, okay? Now, to make it easier, I'll call one George and the other, I don't know, Maurice. Okay, George and Maurice. Now, George worked at this corporate job, and he was very capable, very intelligent, and he thought to himself that he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And then he started looking into the possibility of starting a business. And he realized that the business that he would start, he realized that he lacked the ability to do it on his own. And he realized on further reflection, I had long conversations with George, by the way, about this issue. He realized that his own personality was such that he would not make an effective entrepreneur. He was a guy who was a specialist in negotiation, as a matter of fact. He was a trader, as a matter of fact. And he realized that he was an exceptionally good trader, but he was very weak in other necessary aspects of starting his own business. He was thinking of starting his own hedge fund, as a matter of fact. And he realized that in the qualities that he would need to build a successful hedge fund, he lacked those qualities. And he realized that he could not get a partner who would fill in those gaps. And so he realized that for him, it would be wrong to start his own shop, to start his own hedge fund, and that it would be better for him to just maximize his career as a trader as opposed to start his own hedge fund. Now, this guy, we talked about it at length, and he was never afraid of starting the business. He just realized that he wasn't going to succeed. And it wasn't an issue of being overly cautious. I knew him well, and I knew that he lacked those qualities. What surprised me and what made the conversations so memorable was that he had the self-awareness to realize that he would not succeed. Now, Maurice, on the other hand, Maurice was a guy who worked in retail. It was pretty successful, retail at a corporate level. Now, he thought to himself of starting a retail company. And he had everything to make it happen. He had contacts with financing people. He had contacts with wholesalers. I mean, he could have done it. And yet he never did. He kept saying that he wanted to. But he kept saying that, oh, it's not the right moment. Oh, this won't fall into line or that. And it's just not the right moment. And then he started explaining it because, his wife had a kid and then another kid and then this and that. And all kinds of excuses not to do it. He had the ability to do it, unlike George. George couldn't do it because he realized that he lacked certain qualities that were necessary to make a successful business of his own. He was very good as part of a team, as part of a trading team and making a shit ton of money. He was excellent at that. But the other qualities necessary to start his own firm, he lacked them. And he didn't really want to partner up with other people. And he realized that, no, just have a career and work for other people was the path forward for him. Whereas Maurice had everything necessary to succeed. Everything. But he didn't do it. His fear, and that's what it was, his fear controlled his actions. See? Now, the story of George and Maurice is actually very important because you see, a lot of times people confuse cowardice with caution. In the case of George, he was being not overly cautious, he was being realistically cautious. And never confuse caution and cowardice. And don't second guess when you make a decision made out of caution. An example. Years ago, back in 2011, I think, I was offered the opportunity to get in on Bitcoin at an absurdly low price. I think $5 or something like that. I forget. I was offered a big batch of Bitcoin back in the day at a single digits, right? And I turned it down. I thought, this is tulips. This is bullshit. And I've explained in other videos why I think that Bitcoin was just bullshit, and I still think that. But the point is, see, I didn't have a crystal ball back in 2011. If I'd known that the thing would rise up to $18,000, yeah, of course I would have bought it at the time. Sure, I'm not a dummy, right? But I didn't have a crystal ball. I was cautious. I was a cautious investor. I looked at this investment opportunity and I decided that it was not a wise investment. I was cautious. Later, it turned out that it wasn't the right decision, that if I had gotten into Bitcoin, it would have been very successful. But see, I'm talking about Bitcoin. There were a whole number of businesses that I could have invested in 2011 that I didn't invest in because of rational reasons, and they all failed. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, because you only remember the golden ticket that you missed out on. You never remember the dog shit businesses that you were smart enough to avoid. Okay, don't fall into that trap. Okay. If you make a decision out of caution and then later it turns out that you should have, forget it. Don't worry about it. Okay? Caution, there's nothing wrong with being cautious is the point I'm trying to make. A lot of people think that there is. There isn't. And see, you should be as cautious as you want to be. There is nothing wrong with that. There are some people who are who embrace risk. I'm one of them. I love to go into new things and new fields and try out new crap and potentially make a fool of myself and potentially crash and burn. Sure, I love that feeling, but that's me. And you might be a much more cautious person. I'm not going to begrudge somebody who's cautious. A lot of times I wish I'd been more cautious. Yeah, sure, because a lot of times I've gotten myself into trouble because of my lack of caution. Caution is not the issue, okay? Because where does caution come from? It comes from sober reflection. Caution, what's going on when somebody who is cautious? He is thinking clearly and rationally about a situation and realizing that for him, it's too risky. And that's perfectly fine, see? And that's why a cautious person is not a coward. Not at all. A cautious person is the opposite of a coward. He's a person who acted rationally and thoughtfully and allowed his rationality and his thoughtfulness and his knowledge to dictate his action, which is exactly what a coward does not do. Because a coward, as to repeat this so that you remember it, a coward allows his fear to dictate his actions. See the difference? Now, insofar as other people that you might meet who are cowards, okay? Now, it's not going to be easy to spot the coward. It's not that they walk around with a sign on their head or the word coward on their tattooed to their forehead. Of course not. It's going to be hard to spot them. If you find out that somebody is a coward, that they allow their fear to dictate their actions, you do not want them on your side. You do not want to associate with such people. You do not want to be friends with such people. Such people, cowards, you want them to be your enemies. You want them to be your counterparty in any kind of deal. Let me explain. At crunch time, a coward is going to run. At crunch time, when the fear rears its head, he's going to run because he's going to allow his actions to be dominated by his fear, right? So if he's your ally, at the toughest moments, that ally is going to flee. He's going to run away. Yeah, because he's going to be afraid of the situation and rationalize that you're not going to win and so he's going to flee from your side. So that's why you don't want a coward on your side or to associate with a coward, because at the moment when he is most needed, he will not be there. Okay? So that's why you don't want to associate with a coward. But you do want to do business deals with a coward. You do want a coward as your opponent. You do want a coward as your enemy. Because, see, if somebody's actions are dictated by their fear, then they become supremely predictable. You can make them act in ways that are beneficial to you. You see what I'm saying? A man who allows his fear to dictate his actions becomes predictable, because what you can do is you can shake the thing that he fears. You can shake it in his face, you know, as if it were like I don't know, like a little voodoo doll. Just shake it in his face. You know, here, I have a little toy here. You know, my kid's spider. Okay, you can shake this thing that he's afraid of in his face, and it'll make him afraid and run potentially in the direction you want him to. See, if he's in the spot where you want him to, and if you maneuver him in such a way that his only chance of running away is in a direction you want him to, then you can make him go in that direction by shaking the thing that he fears the most. Shake it in his face. See what I'm saying? Yeah. That's why you want somebody, a coward, across the table from you. You want that guy that you're negotiating with to be a coward, because he's predictable. Finally, there's something to be said that cowards are made, not born. See? And let me add something to the previous video I made about bullies, because that video, I'm not very happy with it, because it came out of just a deep sadness, a deep well of sadness and anger on my part. And I didn't look at the good things of having to deal with bullies, and I'll explain them now. You see, the only way to not be a coward, that is, the only way to learn to master your fear, is to rub up against it. And bullies are a great way to do that, especially when you're growing up. In my own case, as I explained before, my father was a bully, and he scared the shit out of me just about every day. And because of that, I developed an enormous tolerance for fear. I am able to handle my own fear. I'm able to rein it in when it gets ready to bolt. With me on it, of course, I can rein it in and control it, so that I can make rational decisions. Now, I'm able to do this not all the time, because sometimes my fear, my emotions, my temper gets away from me, because I'm human, right? But bullies are a great way to learn to be brave, to learn not to be a coward. Because, see, bullies, they scare you, of course, because their power comes from the ability to inflict fear on you. If you rub up against the things that make you afraid enough times in control situations, or in situations that really don't matter, like when you're a child or an adolescent, you'll learn to control your fear. And so that's why I've always thought that whenever I'm afraid of something, what I try to do is to confront it again and again and again until I'm no longer afraid of that thing. See? And that's the way to not be a coward, to rub up against that thing that you're afraid of until you get used to it, you know? Yeah, I mean, your skin might be very sensitive to something, but you rub it enough and it builds up a callus. You see what I'm saying? And that's the thing, because, like I said, cowards are made. They're not born. We're all born with emotions. We're all born with the fight or flight response. But it's what we do with that and how we use our reason and rationality that can determine whether we're a brave man or a coward. See? And so, if you've acted in ways that you consider cowardly, and by the way, our own guilty conscience is always the toughest critic, because we know when we turned away from something because it was the reasonable thing to do, and we know when we turned our back and ran because we were afraid. And our conscience, never forgives us, right? Yeah. Because you know it, I know it, we all know it. If you've acted in cowardly ways in the past, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a coward for the rest of your life. And what you have to do is recognize those things that you're afraid of and confront them. Confront them again and again and again until you are no longer afraid. That's what you have to do. You have to figure out what categories, what interactions, what it is that makes you afraid. Because see, it's a terrible thing to live in fear. It's a terrible thing to have a life whose outcome is dictated by fear. Because ultimately that means that you're not in control of your life. Your life is like a ship being tossed at random by the waves, rudderless. And a rudderless ship will eventually run aground. So don't be that way.